The question is about whether it's necessary to have teachers and in the field of, in the area of one's own spiritual practice. It is interesting that in our daily lives, dealing with mundane matters, mundane but necessarily very important, utilitarian things that run the world per se, a household that has running water, you have plumbing system, for example. Let's say you have some blockage somewhere, the sewage isn't working. There's not enough water pressure, for example, that's reaching the second story, or you don't have enough water to, being pumped into your house, into the bathrooms, or there's not some type of a glitch that's not allowing you to have Wi-Fi. If you have a landline, a phone line, it's not working. So what do we do? And you can come up with a myriad other examples from daily life. What do we do when it is outside our area of expertise? When we cannot fix the problem? What do we do? We call a specialist, don't we? When the lock, when the hinges, or when the door, or when the roof is leaking, something is happening where it requires serious attention now, not like next week, now. We bend over backwards simply to get someone to come to fix the problem, don't we? Same thing with your computer, with your phones, etc. The examples are many, as I said. Now, we all agree on how important that is, and it's undebatable when it is beyond the scope of one's own area of expertise to address the matter, the issue that's at hand. However, when it comes to one's own religious or spiritual practice, we think that it's a level field. We think that we can do it on our own. Thank you very much. We don't need guidance. We're okay. I can read a book or two on meditation and I'm fine. We've trivialized the role of proper teachers. We live at a time period where people could look at something on in a book even, let's say how to swim, and they say, I'm okay. Yeah, but you're in the middle of, I don't know, the desert. There's no pool around, and you think you're telling everyone that you can swim, you can float, you can maintain buoyancy in the ocean, in the sea, in a pool, when there's none around. And you don't know, definitely don't know how to swim. You just read an article and you just followed the steps, and it's like, yeah, I think I got it. We've trivialized it. Just like in the 80s, I would see individuals who would read a book or read an article in a martial arts magazine, and they would do some of the moves, and they say, okay, I got that application down, and I know how to defend myself against an attacker, for example. You just have to shake your head, and it's just... So no, you cannot practice and really get somewhere in the practice when you are not being supervised, watched, taken care of, in a sense, in the form of someone who cares enough about you to watch and observe and to offer guidance. Now, this is the problem. Another issue about this is, I mean, you can narrow it down to the same factor, which is the lack in humility. Because everybody thinks that they have it. Because, as I said, we've trivialized anything to do with religion and spirituality. We completely shaved off the edges. So it's like there is no specialization required. Remember the sewage system, the plumbing? We have more respect towards someone who knows how to fix the plumbing in the house, in the basement of your grandmother's house, than your future, your happiness. Taking ownership of your moral well-being, if it's there. It requires guidance, it requires a set of principles, it requires a strategy, expertise. Now, this is a problem, a major problem, because you might not find, or you might actually haggle and bargain with individuals from different, you can call and bargain with several different plumbers as to who is going to offer you the best deal, which roofer is going to fix it for a cheaper and better price and do a better job, the best job. The governments do this all the time. Big companies do this all the time. People do this. You go around looking for the best, most convenient deal where everybody goes home happy. So you have competition. That's how big, companies, or especially governments, give away contracts. If they want to build a building, a major contract, whatever area it's involved in, and so they would have at least a few candidates who make proposals, and they show them to the powers that be, this is how much I will do it, for how much, and these are the materials, and they're not going to be, cost cutting and all that, etc. So basically, you will find the best bargain. It doesn't work like that when you are dealing with your own spiritual development. YouTube will not fix it for you. Reading a book here and there will not do it for you. Even going on a retreat or 2 or 10 or 100 will do it for you. You need proper guidance. And the guidance itself, it's still one hand. My dad used to say, son, you can only wash your hands when you have both of them involved. You can't just wash your hands by one hand doing the job. You need both hands there doing the job. So you doing all those things, researching, going and putting your effort, wholeheartedly attending this and that. But the other aspect of it is necessary. There is guidance needed. People used to cross hundreds and hundreds of miles to reach the Buddha, to ask questions. Not just for curiosity's sake, but to learn actual methods that they could put into practice so that they can improve, they could fix the leakage. That's another term for asava, by the way, leakage. Influx, something that's leaking. asava. The asava of ignorance is dreadful among the others. But what do we do about these things? Because what is driving us is that lack in humility. We therefore have more respect, acknowledgement of the other person's expertise. Other person here could be the person who repairs your phone, your computer, fixes the Wi-Fi connection, gets your power going, started again, fixes your roof. We have more respect for those individuals in our lives than we do of teachers who will help us to get us out of misery, out of samsara, the continuous, incessant, endless cycles of rebirth that do not end, by the way, on their own. See, you cannot sleep yourself off or out of samsara through some miracle. It's impossible for you to somehow just waltz into Nibbana. It doesn't work like that. It's not going to come from reading books. There's not a phrase somewhere in somewhere that's waiting for you to discover, for you both to meet, that phrase and you. So it's just a matter of time. No, work must be done by each and every one of us. But that work is required to have someone looking at you, in a sense diagnosing you spiritually, to see where you are. Just like you have a toothache, you go to a dentist. They say, okay, there's this problem. You have something wrong with your knee, you go and they do an MRI, they see that there's a crack in the bone or something, or a ligament. You wouldn't have known. Specialists have looked at it. Now you know. So what we're doing essentially is we are gambling the rest of whatever years we have, time we have, months we have, days we have, until the end of this life. So we're gambling away what we have, thinking that I got this. Well, next time, your Wi-Fi doesn't work, your plumbing doesn't work, leaking, there's a roof that's leaking, or your car isn't running. You can come up with a whole zillion problems. Try to fix it yourself, every single one if you can, and see how daunting that is. And how much, how reliable will your work be? You're going to be crossing your fingers, closing your eyes, and just looking up towards the roof to see if it is going to leak, because there's a tremendous, powerful thunderstorm going on. Would you put your loved ones in a car that has a flimsy brakes on it, or an engine that you tried to fix over the weekend because you read some books, or you've never touched an engine, but then you're going to let your loved ones, let's say your daughter or your child, drive cross country on her own? Would you trust that? Or would you get a specialist? I think we all know the answer to that. So when it comes to your own spiritual life, there's nothing more valuable than that, by the way. Everything else serves that. You eat food to gain happiness, to gain understanding that you're living a happy life. Your stomach is full, you're okay. When you go and ask a very rich person, ultimately, when all of the boxes are checked, you can narrow it down to one thing. Everybody wants to be happy. The absence of pain, that's what we're talking about. But no money, no nothing will be able to give you that. The religious path does provide you with that. And specifically, when we're talking about the Dhamma in Buddhism, that is what we are all about. That's what the path of the Buddha is all about. To address this major problem of suffering. The mental, emotional suffering. The spiritual suffering. There's so many questions about that we think we've answered it all. We know what's necessary and that's it. We got this. And then the moment comes and we are left with disappointments. And that leads the person down another rabbit hole. Through the tunnel system, the endless, ceaseless, slippery, no way out tunnel system of samsara. From life to life. And all the suffering that we witness, our own suffering and all those other people, our loved ones that we develop, we see, we grow through with, and see them undergo their suffering. Just to give you a glimpse. Life after life, that's what we're going through. But we just neglect to place enough emphasis on its importance as we place importance on the cell phone connection. Why is my Bluetooth not working? Let me get a specialist. We do not hesitate for that. But we are hesitating when it comes to the practice of the path that needs to be walked. It cannot be walked by anyone else, by the way. The teacher can never walk the path for us. That's where the understanding will come from. Our own understanding, when we do follow the instructions. And it's not the person here, the instructions of this person or any teacher out there. No. If they are legitimate teachers in this path of Dhamma, then there's only one teaching, and that is the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the path that the Buddha delineated, that he discovered, that he walked. And that's how he and everyone else, ever since, have been able to attain freedom from suffering. So it's that practice. But the teacher will listen, will see you, will observe you, will identify those holes in your practice, in your character, in the lies we tell ourselves. The teacher will look at you from behind and see where the crooked areas are, the loopholes, the errors in your understanding, and the teacher is going to call you out on those. The problem is people want to drop the teacher or drop the method or say, you know what, I got this, I'm going to do my thing. Well, go ahead. What you're going to end up is with when we were children, we would make this screen. We would make a box and draw a screen on a monitor. So basically that was the TV. And glue that on top of this box. There's no transistors, there's nothing. It's just a white paper with some drawing. And we would pretend that there's a show going on. It's going to be exactly like that. And you're going to tell yourself stories about the show, the segment that you're watching. I wonder how far you could go with that when you pretend that you have a cell phone in your hand when it's made out of paper like that, drawing of digits, and try to send a message like that to someone. Doodle it. draw it on a piece of paper. It's ridiculous. So stop gambling your life away, pretending that you have forever to figure this thing out on your own without discipline. That's where the teacher comes in. That's where the method comes in. If they are proper teachers, they will insist that you get some discipline. It's nothing new, by the way. In any endeavor, if you don't have a discipline, it won't work. But that's what it is. When it comes to spiritual path, when it comes to the religious development of a person, we think every other discipline in one's life, every other avenue of one's development as a person, educational, emotional, social, academic, professional, they all require discipline, and everybody bows their head to that. They venerate that, they respect that, the validity of discipline in all these endeavors to gain success, to gain fulfilling outcomes. But when it comes to one's own religious, meaning the spiritual development, the maturation of the person, understanding, the discernment to develop, where there's true personality change taking place, the person becomes virtuous. There's a deepening of understanding. There's a holiness that is developing in the person. When it comes to that, we want to, as they say, switch the tables. We don't accept the importance of being disciplined in that. Well, every other avenue in your life, every other aspect of your life, you were completely in agreement of the importance of discipline being there as playing a crucial part. Why did you just, completely nullify, cancel out the importance of discipline in regards to this most important part of your life? So that's also missing. Again, it comes from the lack in humility and sufficient respect to be brought to this area of your life, which is the reason why we see the whole planet, in a sense, lacking virtue. We're, destitute, basically, in the area of religion. It's become complete, superficial thing. That's why you also can understand the masses and their disappointment in what religion has turned into. It's, whether it's rites and rituals, etc. The meaningfulness of it, of the practice, unfortunately, people have been and are throwing the baby with the bathwater. And it's sad. But it's, again, each one has to do the job for themselves. It's not a collective maturation or development. You cannot breathe for someone. You cannot exhale for someone. You cannot think for someone. You cannot walk for someone else and develop wisdom. Purify your heart for someone. You can only do it for yourself. And as you're doing that, the world around you will be responding to it appropriately. So what we're dealing with is the presence of spiritual pride. When the person doesn't have humility, the person has pride. In the case of us being, closing an eye when it comes to the importance of maintaining that need to have a specialist. That means the person is saying, no, I'm fine. It's like somebody who's bleeding. Chetva is a term that we have in Pali. It means severed or decapitated. Imagine your limbs are, or, chopped off, severed for something happened, an injury, major injury. And you're saying, I got this, I'm just going to put some tissue on it. No, you can't stop the bleeding. You have to fix the bleeding. You have to stop it first. Otherwise, there's not going to be any blood left to circulate, to get oxygen to your brain. Your heart will stop. You will die. So what we have in the case of individuals neglecting to have this respectful position towards their position as an individual who needs help. No, I'm okay, I'm going to be fine. When I say they lack humility, what essentially we're saying is there's a tremendous amount of pride. The Buddha called it mana, the conceit. Asmi mana, I got this, I am this. The presence of a teacher who is the specialist, when we find such a person, which is becoming more and more rare, mind you, if a person comes across such a teacher, they need to hold on to dear life to this teacher, because it's like learning a new language. Everybody speaks it, or at least you don't speak it, and you go to a place where they don't speak your language. So you cannot stomp your feet and be prideful and say, well, I speak other languages, so they have to comply, they have to make room for me, they have to learn my language. No, it doesn't work like that. So the humility has to be present in you to approach it, and lowering your head is essential. Otherwise, what is pride in this case? Like I was saying with the electrician or the plumber or somebody who's a specialist, a physician, a dentist. You have a toothache, you have, cavities in your teeth, or there's a root canal or something like that. There's a pus developing, infection, inflammation somewhere in your body. You go and seek out the help of a specialist. Now, as the surgeon is making their incisions to try to pull out that tumor from your body, you don't say, well, no, I'll do it. I mean, to us it sounds ridiculous, because we start laughing of course not. We have to give way, we have to lower our head, we have to be admitting our ineffectiveness in our skills. In other words, we are dependent. This is where the pride comes in. We live in a culture, at a time period where people say, for many things, they say, sure, yeah, I have to go to school, I have to learn. But that infantile, teenage-like way of thinking that thinks of itself as a very much narcissistically, that I know everything. What I see is, despite the fact that the person might go and become an attorney, a professor, he might become a physician, this and that, when it comes to the focus and attention that needs to be given to one's own spiritual well-being, for example, I mentioned the development of virtue in oneself, the development of one's mind, the development of one's discernment. We say, no, I got this. I can do this. I mentioned a few times how one time I had a therapist, acquaintance of mine. We used to take part in different organizations, and he was a psychologist, and I was a psychotherapist. So we would exchange ideas, this and that. And one day we were standing by the elevator, and I was going to my own office, and he was going to his office in the same building to meet clients. And suddenly he said, "Oh, mindfulness, by the way, it's like anyone can teach it." "What do you mean?" I said. He says, "Anyone can teach it. But just being aware, right?" And I shook my head and I said, "Unfortunately, that's what the people have gotten the wrong idea of, because that's what has been promoted in society. Every person, as they say, Tom, Dick, and Harry, can sit down and think that they know. They write books on mindfulness. Come on." So what that does is it kind of, in their mind, levels the field, so you do not have to have a specialty. It took me years, thousands of clinical hours to get to a position where I could serve the community as a therapist. Similarly for him. So nobody came in and cut us some slack over there. Shortcuts to cut corners for us to get those licenses, state licenses, the degrees, this and that, or the clinical hours we had to do. Nobody came in. You can't do that. You have to fulfill those requirements. So when it comes to fulfilling the requirement of practice, which working closely with a teacher, upon whom one has to be dependent, not the other dependencies that we have. For example, I'm this kind of a person. Oh, I don't like to be in a position where I have to do what other people are telling me. Well, why should I keep the 5 precepts? Or why should I be, limited in what I can and cannot do? There's that crowd. Remember the narcissistic, teenage-like thinking? I've met quite a number of 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50, 60, 70-year-old individuals who think like that, still. Because for them, everything else, every other discipline, like, plumbing I mentioned, the chef, you go and pay a lot of money to sit down in a restaurant to eat the food that somebody else prepared. Why? Because it's a Michelin star or something. Well, nobody's going to argue that. It's supposed to be good. It is good, in fact. We just go, pay money, and eat their food. No questions asked. You go to a physician, you go to a person who fixes your phone or computer. You're not going to sit down and argue, because the outcome is they will fix your phone. You have to trust them. And you're trusting their reviews and all that. But you leave yourself and your ego outside. So everyone is okay with that. Everyone is perfectly fine with that arrangement. It's almost like an unspoken rule. However, when it comes to the practice, which is the most important practice, not your degrees, not your licenses, not how much money you make ultimately, because everything else is going to be forgotten. How you develop internally, grow mentally, emotionally, how rich you become, wealthy become in your heart, in your understanding of emotions, cultivation of your mind, and how well you can control your, shall we say, instincts, anger when it arises. Do you experience serenity? Is there a depth developing in you? That's what I mean by personality change. Those are all the results of deepening your spiritual practice. So, when it isn't there, something else is occupying its space. It's not giving in. It's not moving aside. And that is the other dependencies, the other things, in the wrong direction. So this is why people fall out. And they want to do their thing. They want to go and do their retreats on their own. Why? Because, well, I'm sorry, but I don't like to relinquish my my authority over me. Well, you're relinquishing your authority when the plumber comes to fix the house. You're relinquishing your authority when the roofer comes. You're not going to go and stand on their shoulder and say, well, are you putting the nail in the right direction? They're going to kick you out of the edge of the rooftop. Get out of here. This is my work. Don't interfere. When I was a teenager, I was apprenticing as a goldsmith. I wasn't a goldsmith then. I was just apprenticing. In those days, they had that. They called them journeyman or apprentice, where you had to pay money and to learn a trade. My dad took me to this goldsmith, and so he was teaching me how to learn how to work with gold. And it came a point where I had to solder, like I had to melt a piece of gold and attach pieces of gold, whether it was this or that jewelry piece. And then somebody he came and stood over my shoulder. And he said, well, I actually couldn't do it. And I said, I'm sorry, you're standing over my shoulder. I can't do it. And he said, I'm sorry, you have to do it. That's the image I just got from somebody working at the rooftop, and you go over there and say, no. Or imagine you stand next to the surgeon and you say, are you doing it right? Or a chef. There are chefs that horrific. There's that some years ago, I remember, Gordon Ramsay or somebody, right? That's his name. And he would yell and curse and throw people out of his kitchen. Imagine you go and stand next to him as he's preparing your food, cursing and swearing and all that, yelling and screaming, and you go and say, excuse me, are you preparing the food right? He will throw you out of the whole restaurant. So, unfortunately, this is one's own life. This is your own life that we're talking about. We can't be grotesque about it. We can't be so whimsical when it's every single day that's passing and you're not taking charge of it. And that is how you take charge, by the way, of your life. Not by, as I said, stomping your feet and saying, this is how the spiritual practice should be. So you can't have caveats. You can't have certain things that the teacher, if you find one, again, that's a big if. And that's one of the reasons why while I was in Asia, in Malaysia specifically, and I was invited to speak, I said to this group of people, I said, if Lord Buddha was present today, he would be thrown out from most of the temples. People would not come to listen to him. Imagine the Buddha that everybody's wearing a picture, has a picture of, or wearing, or has his so-called statue in here and there in their altars, in the house, in the temples. That Buddha, the real historical Buddha, if he were here today, people would not go to listen. He would not be popular. People don't consider this fact. Because what you had were a lot of people who were humble at the time, who said, I don't know everything. My quest, as it were, has run its course, and I can't do it on my own. Let me go. That's what Sariputta and Moggallana did, as Upatissa and Kolita. And the hundreds of thousands, if not more, beings who came to the Buddha to listen, you relinquish your pride. You don't attach to your titles, you don't attach to your possessions, you don't attach yourself to your car, the color of your car, the brand of your car, the way you wear your clothes, your hair, your habitual patterns. You don't seek out dependency in those trivial, foolish things as before. When the teacher says, don't do that, why are you associating with those people? Why are you going over there? If you want this, then that can't be. It's not the teacher's way, by the way. But the mind could translate it like that. Oh, the teacher is, he or she is putting me in this subjugated position, or it's a very stifling position. I feel like I don't have any authority. It's not like that. There were some characters like Malunkyaputta in the Buddha's life or Udayi, Sakul Udayi, and other characters at one point or another who turned Buddha into that image in their mind. They lied about the teacher as well to their friends and family to justify their own stupidities, because they were not growing. Devadatta, what was Devadatta all about? He wanted to keep his pride. He did not relinquish his pride. There was no humility. So the Buddha was only serving a purpose. There was no development in him. And so long as the principles and the teachings that the Buddha gave matched his ego, matched his desires, and it did not in any way shake up or even remotely threaten his unwholesome habits, then the Buddha was okay. But the moment it did, then there was a problem with the Buddha. He was not the best teacher. He was not the teacher for him. In fact, I am a teacher then, Devadatta says. I have to go and replace the Buddha. Malunkyaputta went and said, unless you do this, unless you show me miraculous feats, unless you're able to, do these things that I heard that you can do, then I'm going to leave. I mean, I am here, I shaved my head and gave up my family, my possessions, this and that. What am I seeing? I'm not seeing anything from you. So basically, he thought that the Buddha was a performer for him, entertainer. And the Buddha said, did I ever promise you, come and become a monk so that I can actually perform for you these miracles that you're talking about? And he had a moment to think about it. He said, no, this is exactly. You and your foolish ideas. So people have their foolish ideas when they approach the Dhamma. Why? Because they're juvenile. Even if you're 40, 50, 60, 80 years old. It's a specialization. You need to lower your head. What that means is you need to put away your pride. There's a term called nisaya in this Dhamma and discipline, which is dependency. Every bhikkhu, anyone actually, a monastic who needs to go and train, they don't just waltz in there as, I got this. No, you have to learn, just like the apprentice. The young apprentice who's learning goldsmithing and things, where you go into medicine. You need to do the practicum at least. You need to learn how to, the intellectual, academic stuff, the theories, concepts you might even get perfect score on. But you need to start applying. But no one's going to give you throw you in the position of a doctor and say, okay, go ahead, you're good now. But that's what people want. Because they think they're solid, they're okay, they got this. While they stay in the sewage of suffering, their suffering. That's why time is running out. Time is running out. In this day and age, everybody thinks that, all they have to do is feel, that self-confidence, and that's enough. I got this. Well, it's not going to work. Like those people who would watch YouTube videos and all of a sudden feel like they can lose the weight on their own, this and that, when they've tried everything out there, every diet, this, that. And they go and find a trainer. And the trainer says, this is the method. This is what I need you to do. This is how I need you to eat, where to go, what to do, this and that. So what 99% of the people will do, however, they're going to fall out of that pattern that's being established for them, because they're going to come up with different excuses and not to follow through. Why? Because the complacency, the laziness is what they're familiar with. The lack in discipline in this. So the person, that's what happens every January, every December. People go and register, take classes and, get memberships at a gym. And everyone falls out pretty much. Over 60, 70, 80, 90%, if not more, fall out within the second month. So the teacher is the specialist. But the specialist is nothing if you are not allowing them to be the specialist in this. That's why you chose. That's why both of you chose each other. The teacher says, okay, are you willing to do the work? Yes, okay. Do you know what it entails? Yes, okay. I have certain expectations of you. The roofer says, I have certain expectations from you. I need you to pay me this much for this time, this amount of time that I put in for these materials, and we'll finish it by then. And the other requirement, you stay away from my work. You go and do your thing, I'll do my thing. You can't breathe down my neck. You have to trust me that I'm doing my job. You don't go and walk into a kitchen while the chef is preparing your meal and dictate how much of this, how much of that ingredient puts inside the food. That's a specialty. So when the teacher says, I need you to maintain sila, I need you to stay away from certain crowds, certain activities, certain places that you want to still go to, hang out, and activities you want to engage in, and other activities that you need to do but you're not, then there's a discrepancy. There's a short circuit somewhere. And unfortunately, teachers have also been responsible in this corruption over time. When a person says, oh, I can teach mindfulness, anybody could teach mindfulness, that already says teachers have not been properly instructing. It's not a weekend thing. It's not a book thing that you can learn and all of a sudden, or certification, you're good to go. It doesn't work like that. It has to involve all three aspects of a person's development. Their moral, virtuous development has to be there first. You can't live an immoral, unethical life and expect yourself to be practicing mindfulness, let alone proper meditation. It doesn't work like that. So the teachers have to make that clear by simply being generous at a temple, at this association, at that center, supporting teachers and monks, let's say. It does not make it, does not get it right. There's certain responsibilities one has to do, because dana is the very first step, the generosity. Where's the others? Where's sila? Where's samadhi? Where's panya? They're not there yet. So the person has to then engage, not when I say then, like sequentially later on. No, at the same time. The person has to be living a virtuous life, as well as protecting one's mind from one's own proclivities, as I mentioned, instincts, meaning somebody makes you angry. How do you respond? Does your self-control leave the building when you meet that person, when that person says something? Well, there goes the education you were supposed to be receiving. So this is where humility comes in, and you don't trust your, in a sense, impulses anymore as you used to. Why? Because now you have a specialist in your life. You have to trust the roofer, the plumber. I'm using these examples because unfortunately people respond better to these professions. Even though being a teacher in this Dhamma and discipline is not a profession, people have turned it into that, unfortunately. Spiritual pride is the big problem here. And lying to ourselves. You have a culture where, that's why if the Buddha were, let's say, to be here today, people would not want to listen to him. Because he would be talking about Sila, Samadhi, Panya. We know that. He's the one who taught us this. He's the one who teaches this. Teaches us all of this. And you have to get yourself out. When I say that, you have to get your own interpretations of the Dhamma and how it's supposed to be out, so that the teacher can do their job. You have to get yourself out of the kitchen and go and sit at your table where you're supposed to. The trust part. The analogies fall apart after some time, the metaphors, because of course it's a joint effort, as I said, right? But when the teacher is saying something, Devadatta had to trust the teacher. When the teacher says, Devadatta, you're crossing the line. Malukyaputta, you're crossing the line. Go and sit and meditate. That's you going back to your table and sitting there and following the instructions of the teacher. Instead of every 5 seconds opening your eyes saying, well, you know, I used to do it this way. I think it's better. Soon enough, you're going to say, you know what, I don't think I need the teacher. Many people left the Buddha. And that just shows they were not ready. So unfortunately, the way it's packaging it for oneself is the pride itself can convince you that you are ready to take care of this by yourself, but in essence, you are not ready for this, or in fact, you will never be ready, because you are ready for yourself, to take care of yourself, to, pull yourself up from your shoestrings and really do the work on your own. If that were true, you would have already been at the place where you wanted when you first approached the teacher. You weren't there. So the fighting with the teacher has to stop, and it will stop only when you put away your pride, when you develop humility, when you really do the work. When you don't do the work, all the excuses in the universe will show up. And usually they will turn into a focus upon the teacher, and the teacher is the problem. Many people left the Buddha, as I said. Imagine, the Buddha became the problem for these individuals. They saw him as the problem, and they left. So that's what we have today. Things haven't changed much in that sense. So that's how I would approach answering that question. Sukhiyot.